Okay, it is December 3rd. It's time for the Digital Roundtable. We have a great show today. Lots going on as we head into the closing of the year. The weather is cold everywhere. But before we get started, let's have John Sibley Butler play a tune.
In the November and chill, when the village is quiet and still, I took a walk through the fallen leaves to the fishery where my old friend Pagliacci had coffee for me.
All right.
Well, it's cold. That's my song when it gets a little nippy in Austin.
Well, it's the weather is cold and we'll go around the horn on that. But in Austin is it's been as low as 36, and right now it's in the 50s, so that's not bad. We have a great guest today, and I would say that you know, lots of things still going on. There's a bit of a correction around AI stocks, which is normal, but I think it's timely. It's a good thing. There's also a big tsunami of bad news around commercial real estate. A lot of defaults in the making. Seems like residential real estate's going to be okay. The startup scene is blowing everywhere. Fundraising is probably a little harder than usual, given the recent history of abuse and companies that just really don't have what it takes. And then the workforce seems to be changing dramatically. The effect of COVID hasn't changed. A lot of companies are trying to get everybody to go to the office, but it's not happening. Interesting times for sure as we head into the holidays and people disappear in about a week or so. So anyway, what say you, John Butler? What's going on in your world?
Well, I've been spending a lot of time on energy and the importance of energy as we move toward all of the data centers. And I'm happy to say that I've got an article coming out in Homeland Security magazine. We were going to put it in the New York Times, but we didn't figure anything was going to happen. And I also have a white paper that's going in right to the Oval Office, with another guy on on what we need to do with the grid. I think, Andreas, that we're heading for a Pearl Harbor with electricity. And so, and I don't think it's about the whole idea of adding more capacity. I think it's about controls. So the article concentrates on controls and how those controls will actually save electricity. So that's taken a lot of my time, and but the editorial is finished, and I think Homeland Security, more people would appreciate it at Homeland Security than in the New York Times. And you're right on the job market. It is crazy, and the startup market is just blowing up. But it's blowing up differently. It's blowing up in the sense, as we like to say, one person can create $1 billion company now. And, I love to talk about the movement, the book I'm doing on the movement of capitalism to the cloud. We are being trained sociologically now to have a device on our person at all times, and we do the work. And I think that's very, very interesting. And it's just a change in how we do business. But I think the knowledge and know-how around how you create wealth on the cloud is really, really changing. So I think that that has been really, really taking our time with all the data centers. And you correct me, Mr. Electric Engineer, that a data center would take more energy, electricity, to run than Austin, Texas. And I
Mhm.
think you see a lot of farmland that's now being dedicated to the energy. And I think the big thing going now is the stock market. America is divided into the haves and the have-not. And I think the big difference between wealth and non-wealth is growing. I think if you're in the stock market, you're more likely to have, a nice pension for when you retire. I think you're more likely to see some financial growth. If you're stuck in the gig economy, and remember that what has happened when all of the boards sent all of the jobs to China, and it was the board of directors who did that, then we took away the American dream for future generations. And I think one of Trump's ideas is to somehow bring that American dream back to America. And the stock market, what frightens me is that really we're being carried by four big high tech companies, big tech
Mhm.
companies. Facebook, or not called Facebook anymore, and the bit, yeah. And of course, if they have an issue, then the stock market would be be a problem. Now, in startups, we have something that's called, you know, estimating what you're going to have in returns. We have pro formas. Andreas, they have invested so much money in the cloud economy and also in data centers. It'll be a miracle if there's a return on investment. Now, we like to say there isn't a bubble until it bursts. But behind me is that AI is a bubble. I think it's just like the dot-com era. But I think the investments is just astronomical that the companies are spending on investing in that. And then, Andreas, what's interesting for us is we had somebody last week, or week before last week, on Digital Roundtable, and they're trying to get everybody off the cloud back to putting it in their, in their business. So it's a lot going on there. But the biggest thing is this, you know, if we don't find a way for future generations to live in America, to have a decent living, and to learn a quote trade, which is now not the old trades, but is now everything that how to maintain data centers, right? How to maintain, driverless cars, how to maintain driverless 18 wheelers. We just have to be smart enough to provide opportunities for future generations.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's see what Llewellyn King thinks about all that.
Well, I'm tempted to comment on it. I think Johnny's largely right. It's a very fragile bubble economy at the moment. I think we should be very careful about counting startups. They are speculative in their nature, and most startups do not result in billion-dollar corporation. They are a great signal of enthusiasm and of possibility, but they are not money in the bank as such. They are not money in the national bank. We are about to start on a whole new era, and much of what we've talked about will be really in the rearview mirror. We're about to have the workplace invaded, and I use the word deliberately, invaded by robots. The age of the robot is beginning. This is it, the starting point, and they are going to take over most of the repetitive tasks that people do. Now, we tend to concentrate on the most complex end of the robot. For example, robo taxis or robot taxis, whatever you call them, Waymo taxis. But that's very complicated because they have to deal with every conceivable situation that would develop on the highway, from a bird flying into the windscreen to a deer running across the road to an 18-wheeler rolling over. There's so many parameters, but in simple repetitive tasks, robots are here and now and doing the work, and they're going to be doing more so. Up at MIT, I watched a film of a robot loading a delivery truck. I think it was for FedEx, and it was extraordinary. Normally, you'd have to lay out the load on the ground somewhere so that you got the last off on first, the heaviest in the correct position in relation to the axle, etc. And it was a Rubik's Cube that was built up by a human being or several human beings with a lot of skill. You have to get them on in the order in which you're going to not take them off, in reverse order, and they have to be easily accessible. The fragile has to be safe, the heavy has to be at the bottom. There are many aspects to loading a delivery van. A robot does it with AI, does it fabulously. Tell it what you've got, it'll calculate each space. If it's a small object, it will find a place for it. If it's a large, heavy one, it'll find a place for it. Seamlessly, without a large amount of layout, as it's done now. Quite an amazing, because that work, all the parameters are known, and the large language model can easily accommodate it, and robots are taking over that kind of work. If it is repetitive, it is ready for a robot to do it. The more sophisticated robots will do more sophisticated things. We're also about to see the beginning of the face-to-face robot meets person world, where humanoids, robots that basically look like people, and I'll explain in a moment why they look like people, but robots that look like people, they all look to me somewhat like Johnny, but that may be something to do with my attitude to Johnny. Um, when I see a robot playing the guitar, I just think of Johnny. Um,
Well, but at least it's pretty. At least it's pretty.
um, anyway,
Well,
but when we get to those things, for example, waiting tables in a restaurant, Uh, you really, there are two reasons why they're humanoid. One, we're used to the humanoid shape. That's less frightening than if it was a blob or a square or an animated something else. If it had 5 arms, it would be distressing. You don't want to go and have your lunch served by an activated uh, robot that looks like uh, some sort of
mhm.
thing from outer space, or maybe looks like an octopus. You don't want to have your lunch served by a mechanical octopus. You would feel fairly comfortable if it had. Also, because the human body, although it's forward thinking, and though it's balanced on feet, which is not, sound engineering principle as such, but which works very well, it's the human body works very well, and all of the tasks we want the robots to do are already being done by humans. Logically, have them look like humans. Uh, the main thing is we're not ready as a society for what is about to hit us. And particularly, and I've talked about this before and I've written about it quite extensively and mentioned it often on my television program, and that is the problem is governments are not ready for this. They are worrying about regulation, but they don't know what it is they're going to regulate. In the US, we're worrying about the kinds of things that might happen if the states go one way and the federal government goes the other. I tend to think it may still be a little early to regulate. And let me explain to you how this regulation may or may not work. Take Waymo. Waymo is an automated taxi system, or it probably will be taxis, ride sharing, an automated vehicle. They are now operating as taxis in, I think, 5 cities. They're about to go into 19 other cities, but two, Seattle is one, and I forget the other offhand, have already started legislation to prohibit their operating there. So, in theory, you could get a patchwork of cities that allow automated taxis and cities that do not allow automated taxis. The result of that is that the cities that do not allow them may be at a disadvantage. When it becomes clear that the automated taxis are very efficient, they probably are involved in fewer accidents, and people get to like them and be used to them. Suddenly, people won't want to go to a city where they can't get an automated taxi or Uber or Lyft, whatever company is offering a service. And that will be a disadvantage, an economic disadvantage to such a city that has preemptively barred them. For example, people don't really want to go to cities where they can't use their phone to call Lyft or Uber. We want to go where those things that work for us are available and work. Ergo, if you do localized prohibitions, you merely tie one hand behind a city's back. It becomes an unsmart city. On the other hand, we have to deal with the loss of jobs occasioned, and this is a political, social problem that has not been addressed. If we get automated taxis, the taxi drivers, well, there aren't very many left. Many cities don't have taxis anymore because of ride sharing. But there are an awful lot of people making a living driving Uber and Lyft cars. They'll be out of work. An awful lot of people pack trucks to go out and make deliveries. Very soon there'll be an automated truck making the deliveries, and maybe with an automated device on the back, a crane that unloads them. These things are not science fiction, they are within sight. And we have not politically taken a look at how society will accommodate this new thing as big as the Industrial Revolution. We are busy in the political world arguing about trivialities that really are going to make the political class, and I say political class advisedly because it's Democrats and Republicans, out to lunch when the big stuff was happening.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see what Raynard have to chime in about that. Let me introduce our guest, Raynard Jackson, the president and CEO of Raynard Jackson and Associates, who will be with us for the hour. And Raynard lives in DC, and he runs a consulting firm that focuses on the political government affairs, economic development, and public relations elements of progress. Raynard, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good to see you guys. Very
Ab-
interesting program here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we are always discussing the progress of cities, utilities, startups, enterprise, innovation, the creation of wealth, entrepreneurship, and all that. And clearly, Washington D.C. is a phenomenal place that has the leadership of the nation, and where everything confluences in terms of the naysayers and the proposing parties for all these new things. And so I'm wondering, Raynor, we're living in some very interesting times. Tell us a bit about your thoughts on perhaps comments of what you've heard, but more importantly, what is happening in Washington, D.C. with innovation and the economy and the startups and all these political fights? What's top of mind for you?
Well, this subject about AI is very fascinating. That was the case a couple of months ago. Megan Garcia in Orlando, Florida, an attorney, Latina, her 14-year-old son committed suicide because he was talking with this chat box, and the chat box was basically portraying this 14-year-old kid as though the chat box, was his girlfriend, and
Oh,
in suicide.
wow.
And it's been a big hubbub up here in DC. This mother has testified before Congress because we find out that this AI company, AI chatbot, I think it was, they knew the impact this chatbot would have on little kids.
Wow.
They knew it, all their researchers knew it. They kept it from the public. There was no disclaimer on the chatbot before put any controls for minors. And it's all over the news about this 14-year-old beautiful kid committing suicide because the chatbot said, "Come and join me. I am the only one that loves you."
Hmm.
And he took that And so my point behind that is it has shocked the AI community as far as Congress and possible legislation. And this
Sure.
company's being sued, and I think they're probably going to lose the lawsuit, and that's going to have major ramifications on the role of, excuse me, AI, the company that's pushing this AI to little kids with no safety control on there. And so you hear a lot of talk about AI, not only in DC, but among regular people, the grocery store, etc. And what I've been telling folks that have been willing to listen to me, it's almost a foregone conclusion that AI is going to be a more dominant presence in our everyday lives. I don't subscribe to that simply because the thinking is AI is inevitable. I'm saying it's not inevitable. And the general public, not the elected officials, I think the general public, when they find out the devastating impact of this new technology, when they find that these big social media companies knew the research is reminiscent of the tobacco industry way back when. They knew tobacco was harmful to everybody, and especially kids. And the IT companies have not learned their lesson because they're repeating the same mistake. And my prediction is AI it's inevitable in the sense that the technology is not going to be suppressed. But I'm telling you, there's going to be massive regulation that's not going to be friendly towards the company that's pushing this because AI is going to be deemed, and I'm predicting this, Andreas, on your show. AI is going to be deemed a mental health issue.
Hmm.
No one's talking about that.
Interesting. Very interesting. Johnny?
You know, that's an excellent point. Or I think that any kind of new technology has to go through certain things before they're regulated. Whether it's flight, whether it's the computer, whether it's the automobile, and whether it's the train. If you go back and look at the history of technology, you're absolutely right. We had so many train wrecks when trains first became prominent in America. Same thing is true of the airline industry. And this is where you're right on point. As an entrepreneur who works in technology, you cannot harm people. You can't have a drug that harms people. You can't have anything, any kind of technology. You can't have a ball that harms people. You can't have a ball that gets stuck in kids' throat when they swallow it. So I think there's precedent for the relationship between putting a product out there and is that product harmful? Now, in things like the FDA, we do it for drugs. And we know that back in the 1970s, we had a great guy who went to bat for automobiles. And he said, this car will blow up. These things must improve. So I think you're exactly right. And one thing I think you missed out is that when I say write an essay on the work of Llewellyn King, well, they can go in and pull for all Llewellyn's essays. They don't have to quote Llewellyn. They dive into his intellectual property and write an essay, and now it all belongs to me. That is happening now with books, professors with books, and especially happening with people who write popular books.
Hmm.
So I think that with all technology, there's a lag in catching up with the fact that, oh, this motorcycle is great, but what are the safeguards? If you want to see non-regulated stuff, go to China. I was a professor there, and the worst thing I saw was two babies on the back of a of a, of a motorcycle, right? And they were just holding on with no kind of belts, right?
Hmm.
So, but my question is, how long do you think, Raynard, will it take for lawsuits or regulation? Because remember that as a professor, the Constitution guarantees individual rights. It doesn't guarantee group rights. Okay. So individuals would have to file suit against the AI company, especially now as a professor, I've got many books. Everything I write, I got to footnote it. if I say that, for example, if I come out and say the wealth in America, right, will dominate America, I got to quote Llewellyn King's, all his plagiarism. That's what we teach our students. So how do you think will it take for the lawyers to catch up with what's going on? Or will they ever catch up with what's going on? And I don't want to talk about music. Now, you were in the music business, and when that became digital, Andreas, I'm gonna tell you something. The number one record in America now is AI.
AI. Let's talk about that. Yeah, yeah, that's it. So who do you pay the royalties to?
But
No one can
whoever
answer
created the
that.
AI. Andreas, somebody made a song about me. I was shocked. I
Really?
went online and there was a song about John Sibley Butler. I don't know how much they're making on that song. I have no idea.
Hmm. Fascinating. So, Raynard, what do you think? Is Washington, D.C. up to the task to keep us safe?
No. Oh, well, I'll put, here's the question. For the first time in at least my lifetime, and maybe the history of this country, you have the oligarchs, you have the Elon Musk, the Bill Gateses of the world. They're all about profitability, meet their quarterly call estimates. If America be damned in the process, so be it. I have to report to my shareholders. Why is it that we are selling advanced NVIDIA chips to China, knowing that they're using to build military weapons based on our technology and our chips? Who does that? China the Chinese companies are exempt from Wall Street reporting that our American companies are required by law to
Hmm.
submit to the SEC. Chinese
Sure.
companies are exempt from it. Who does that? And so the question is, on a global basis, how do you come up with a global regime of rules, policy, regulations? For example, with this whole environmental issue, if America, and I don't support this green agenda, if America agrees to sign the Kyoto Protocol, China and India does not, who are the two largest producers of pollution in the world, what sense does that make? And that's going to be the same fight globally. If America agrees to AI protocols and regulations, and if China and India and companies of that side refuse to, how do you have a global compact that everyone's going to abide by? And American companies are no longer American companies. They are based in the US, but they're global companies. They have no allegiance to America like the Henry Fords did, the Chrysler, the General Motors, the tobacco company did back in the day. So what you see no one talking about, Andres, is how do you keep America first and yet
Hmm.
participate in the global economy? And no one's been addressing
Sure.
that issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Llewellyn, what do you think?
Well, interesting that you raise these points. I think that they're very interesting, Raynard. I will mention that I do a lot of reading on. I haven't been to India in a long time, and I haven't been to China in a long time. I do a lot of reading, and China in particular has an enormous effort to curtail its emissions, even though it is building new power plants, coal fired. It is not totally a rogue state. The Chinese are, and also are helping the world by producing a lot of uh, uh, very effective solar panels, wind turbines, etc. Clean technologies that they are exporting to the world as well as deploying them themselves. So it's a mixed picture. India is just desperate for power, but it is putting in some of the largest solar installations on Earth. It has the correct climate and the social acceptance of solar, some of which is very inventive, including creating essentially artificial trees to catch as much sunlight as is available. I find that very interesting. So it's easy to denigrate them, but they are doing the best they can. Meanwhile, during this presidency, we've turned our backs on that as a non-priority, and the president himself said at the United Nations that concern about the environment is a con. And that was a pretty depressing thing to hear from an American president. If you happen to know something about the electricity industry, because the electricity industry is so directly impacted by aberrant weather. Used to be, if I asked the president, I know a lot of utility presidents, if you asked one of them what keeps you awake at night, they'd say cybersecurity. Now they say weather. So you can't say it's just a con. And as Andres told us just a short while ago, it's cold everywhere. I'm down in Georgia, it's cold here. It's extremely cold, I understand, up where you are, Raynard. So, so we are actually the country that is out of step in the environmental struggle. Let's go to your main point, AI. I don't think you can stop it. You certainly can mitigate some of the excesses, particularly the business of children interacting with it. You can't stop that totally, but you can put in guards. And new technologies have always been a problem because they have always been abused by children. Drugs are a problem because children use them. We don't really care if someone in my age suddenly starts popping drugs. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter, but it does matter if a 14-year-old does or a 12-year-old. So children are always the cutting edge. When I was a kid, my mother read somewhere that listening to the radio made you nervous. So there wasn't much radio, there was one channel. This was in Zimbabwe. And she thought listening to that was going to do terrible things to me. But there is always concern about the impact, and usually it is justified. Children are very affected by social media. There have been many instances of social media shaming a child, so much so that there have been many suicides. And when there aren't suicides, a lot of real unhappiness produced by the easy availability of destructive things on social media, from kids using it to bully, and bullying is not exactly new, but using it to bully in destructive ways that we never dreamed of, to this terrible situation of conceiving a relationship, a romantic relationship with AI. I might tell you that the other thing that people conceive with AI is a religious relationship. I was interested once in this idea of people maybe take AI to be a religion. It's got many of the attributes. It's omnipotent, it's omnipresent, it's mysterious, etc. And my goodness, I got an email with a telephone number to dial Jesus. I didn't do it. I should have done it. I might have had a very big story. But these are the teething problems of new technologies. Automobiles have been a great blessing to human beings. They've also killed a lot of people. Helicopters have saved innumerable lives. They've also been used in war and killed a lot of people. So that dual use is not unknown, and most things are a two-edged sword. Most technology has about it the two-edged sword dimension. It can be used for good and it can be used for evil, and you cannot easily legislate out evil, but you can try.
Yeah, excellent. Good, very good point. Raynor, don't know what your uh, focus on the next days, closing the year, maybe the beginning of next quarter. But is there anything you can share about some of the activity that you're working on, and maybe there's interesting elements there that we want to follow up?
Yeah, well, going into the new year, President Trump and his administration, they have, in my view, rightfully been accused of spending too much time on foreign policy issues. Successfully in many ways, I would say, but if we are to win the midterm elections next November, Trump has to focus, and he will, and I've been told by my friends in the White House that they're going to focus on the economy, more specifically the small business community, like a laser beam. And what you're going to see is the economy, in my view, the first half of the year is going to face some headwinds with inflation still not being what we wanted, with the negative effect of some of these tariff policies. But I think as you get into the Q2 of next year, I think you're going to see the economy accelerate on an upward trajectory because the Secretary of the Treasury, they have put in place this year, I think, a lot of good fundamentals. We'll have a new Federal Reserve chair, I think, in March, somewhere around that, and it's probably going to be my buddy Kevin Hackett, who's the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, and he's an old steady hand. And so I think the first quarter is going to be turbulent, but as we get into Q2 and Q3, right before the election, I think the economy will be on an upward trajectory. I think inflation will be more under control, and I think we will have probably between now and Q2, maybe two decreases in interest rates. And I think once that happens, that's going to be the accelerant to speed up the recovery within the economy. That's my prediction based on my conversation with the White House, the Treasury, as well as people on the Capitol Hill. Oh, the other thing I've been is April 15th around tax time. That's when the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime will have pushed its way through the system. People begin to feel their taxes out April 15th, and then they're going to realize on a personal level, oh, I can exclude $25,000 from my restaurant job. I can exclude $25,000 in tips from being an Uber driver. So I think by then that money is actually going to be floating through the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just add to it. I've been knowing Raynard a long time, perhaps too long, I might add. And back in the 1970s, we all got together when the blacks left the Republican Party and created a Lincoln, I call it, Republican Party, and we never left. And we have had a meeting in Washington, D.C. every year on Republican politics because we think that despite the changes in the Republican Party, that the party of Lincoln still belongs to Lincoln. And so he gives a ceremony every year. And I must admit that I was the recipient of an award by Raynard some six or 7 years back. And then he tries to integrate that into the policies of America. And my question, Raynard, is this: are we moving toward nationalism? I mean, if all of the global economy now is based on interaction, if you will, or if you look at all of the things that's manufacturing in the supply chain, manufactured in different countries, are we trying to do a nationalism such that America first with absolutely no relationship to whether it's China or whether it's Canada or whether it's Europe, because products are made all over. So how do you think about nationalism and the reality of the global economy?
Well, that's an interesting question because remember the prelude to Trump was the Brexit vote in the UK, I think it's 2015, that they voted to leave the European community. And that agreement was passed by the will of the people, and it still has not been implemented. And so I think you're seeing a reversal of what we thought as globalism. I used to be a big proponent of NAFTA. I wrote my graduate thesis at George Mason University as a big supporter of that. Looking back on my thesis, I was wrong. I based my position on the data we had at the time. We allowed China to be a part of the World Trade Organization. We gave them most favored nation status. I think all of those things were wrong with hindsight. And so I think America first is being translated into my country first. You got Europe, no, Europe. I mean, you have British citizens, and I think my son here in Llewellyn may disagree with me, but you got British citizens saying, "How dare the EU tell me I have to abide by certain immigration policy? How dare the EU tell me I have to accept refugees, asylees, and Muslims who want to practice Sharia law? They don't want to integrate into our community, our society based on our mores." And so I think you're seeing a global trend. Everyone saying, what's in the best interest of my country, not a global entity like the United Nations, like the EU. And I think Trump is the accelerant, whether you agree with the policy or not, but every country now is saying, what's in it for my country? And if that means at the expense of a global order, so be it.
Okay, I think it's one of the more dynamic things because what we have moved from is after World War II kind of economic cooperation to nationalism. And if you go back and look at what Hitler did a great job before he went crazy because Germany had been through a lot of stuff. They had lost World War One, and he brought a kind of nationalism back to Germany with some interesting other stuff. So I'm just trying to figure out how to really balance, if you will, the reality of the global economy, and that's the cloud economy too, with a nationalist position. Now, what I do see is America bringing new kinds of technology and creating new jobs. I happen to think, for example, what I would like to do is to bring the factories from China and put them in Detroit because their technology is way ahead of ours because we dropped it all. The robotic system.
I agree with you, but explain to me why Trump wanted to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. shores. Why is that controversial? Why is there no bipartisan support in any meaningful manner? When we allowed China into the World Trade Organization, the thinking was, and I was a believer in this, if you let them into the big boys club, some of our ideology will over time rub off on the people in China and India when they see that they have an opportunity to buy products that Americans have, technology, TV, cell phone, it would open up their societies. And I would make the argument that either those closed societies are status quo or they're more insular because their country's internal policy is America is our enemy, not that we need to learn to navigate within a global order economically. And so you cannot have American companies manufacturing T-shirts and tennis shoes in China so that people get cheap products at Walmart, because guess what? The price savings the consumer makes at the point of sale is more than offset with lower depressed wages and less opportunity and them being laid off of their job going on to social programs because we don't manufacture. I will make the argument, you cannot have a thriving economy in any Western Western country without a vibrant manufacturing base mixed with a dash of technology.
Well, I agree with that, and I give it to Llewellyn. This is what I agree with. I believe that if I were to stand on the shores of San Francisco, I would see raw materials going to China and finished products that we buy coming back to America. And the classic definition of that is a colony. I think that's true of Germany, and I think that's true of England. So I think what the president is trying to do, although you can't do it in just one swoop, right, of the pen, is to look at Western civilization and its relationship to Eastern civilization, or say the new hegemon in China. But I also think that the Chinese have really, really gotten to the point in terms of development and manufacturing. Why not bring some of the Chinese companies back to our cities and have an interaction in creating jobs in America?
There's no such thing as a Chinese company. They're the Chinese company that's domiciled in the US, but China, if you are a Chinese executive with a company in the US, you are required by not only cultural policy, but legal law within China to report back to the mothership. So you have what, 400,000 or 500,000 Chinese students matriculating here in the US every year in our university. And in order for them to get a visa to the university, they must sign a document saying they will report their findings, they're basically spies. Students.
Well, I agree. I taught in China, right, at the
Can we
university.
get
Let me
Llewellyn
just say
to
one
check?
thing. That's what I agree. I've got some students who are CEOs. Those companies don't belong to them. They belong to the Chinese, to the Communist Party.
Right.
And only about 100,000 people in the Communist Party, but they really don't own those companies. I agree with that. Okay.
Llewellyn, you're muted.
Alan, you're muted. You're muted.
There are a number of points here. I've not got time really to get into all of them. First one is that global trade worked very well. Western civilization was built on trade. The original Chinese prosperity was built on trade. They took a wrong turn with when they decided that they could put a wall around China, and look at the price they paid over the centuries for that kind of thinking, not just physical wall, but the mental wall they put around China. They destroyed their trading ships. They destroyed their global beginnings of global trade. We all know who Marco Polo was. What was that about trade? The British Empire was about trade, as was the Dutch Empire, the Spanish Empire, etc. Trade has been an essential part of the building of the best as well as the worst things in Europe. And we are ourselves the products of the best and the worst things in Europe, as we've imported not only their language, but also many of their attitudes. And we are, in that sense, wedded to Europe. The Atlantic is, in a way, the narrowest ocean because of our commonalities with Europe. And many of these things have been tried. We've tried what we're doing with tariffs with Smoot-Hawley. It was a disaster. It accelerated if it did not bring about the Great Depression. We have upended under this administration the world trading situation. We blame the Chinese emergence on allowing it into the WTO. But China is a very large country with a very large output. Had we not allowed it in, would these other countries not have traded with it? Of course, there would have been an alternative trading pattern emerge without the WTO. It would have become obsolete if the largest manufacturer on earth was excluded. So that's a nice idea that somehow you could have retarded or restricted the growth of China. You could have put it back a year or two or five, but not more. It's too large. It's a great force in the world. China is a force in the world. I was interviewing a young man who's doing amazing things with a new AI company in California, who is himself not Chinese, but he is of Chinese descent. He's from Singapore. His name is Charles Wong, and he is making AI more user-friendly for large companies and for the government. Like, for example, designing a helicopter that can land on the unknown surface of Mars. This kind of use of AI, fascinating and brilliant young man. He's on my television program this week, White House Chronicle. You can look it up on the internet too at whchronicle.com. It's one of the most extraordinary interviews and really wise insights into the Chinese. He said the Chinese are good at scale. They're very good at building a lot of something quickly. They're very adaptive that way. Intellectually, we've had the horsepower and still seem to have the creative horsepower in the US, although I personally feel we're doing terrible things to our universities and our laboratories and our research budgets, and we're going to pay a hideous price for it. Research is very simple. Money in, ideas out. Restrict the money, what do you think is going to happen to the flow of inventions? It's going to be restricted. And I personally know three scientists who are moving to Europe because their research funds at at the American universities, one in Harvard, one at Brown, and one out in San Francisco. These actions have consequences. The idea that you can be a nationalist nation, a fortress America sealed against the world, is just not a possibility. Not only do we have a new generation of weaponry, which was mentioned earlier on this broadcast, but we have a totally new attitude. We also have a new and rather rootless international financial system where money will go instantly to other places. You tax the rich, the money will go abroad. You put up. You see, I think one of the faults in MAGA and MAGA thinking is the last word, again. Again is a reflective of the past, an idea that you can bring back the past to moderate the present is just never worked. These are entirely new times, new technologies. Internationalism is a fundamental part of the world system now, and there are agreements between nations that have worked hugely well, one of which was the banning of the above ground testing of nuclear weapons, followed by the prohibition on testing altogether, which has hung for a long time. There are a lot of international protocols that work very well, including our ability to move cables, to move mail, to move all sorts of things around the world without impediment, and to throw up barriers at this late stage in the sense that you can protect something. What happens is you end up where India did. When the Brits pulled out in 47, India put up a lot of barriers to develop Indian industry. Everything was going, they said, just as Raynard just said, we'll build it in India, it'll come in India, and they did. They brought in British factories, they brought in two I know about in the automobile industry, they brought in the Brits, and they brought in Fiat. They brought in the Morris Company and they started building British cars in India, and they started building Italian cars in India. And when I went to India, you could buy a brand new Morris Oxford that was 30 years old. There was nothing new in it, except it had just been built. No innovations had been added because there was a closed market. You could buy a brand new Fiat 600, little Fiat, 35 years old. No innovations have been added because of a protected market. We know protected markets just produce inefficiency. And we know that if you cut interest rates in the face of inflation, you don't increase economic activity, or you do, but you also increase the rate of inflation, which undermines the economic activity you're trying to develop. There's a lot of truths we know here. Now, I tell you, there's a new truth, and that is AI, which is entirely upending technology that's going to affect all these things. I think we're doing it the wrong way with China. We're so worried about dealing with China, we should be worried about dealing with AI. We should be not worried about the comment whether China makes more robots faster. They are, but that's not the issue. Whether we make them better, whether we solve the problem, and whether we retain the leadership, and that means keeping our research going, keeping ourselves global, sucking in the best minds from around the world, which has always been the American way. We have always been the beneficiaries of the brain drain. Other people's brain drain has been our brain gain. That is endangered. So there's a lot to think about here. It's a tipping point, and I fear the current administration and the thinking that has brought it about, very much like the thinking that brought about the disaster of Brexit in Britain, which has caused basically Britain to lose its great asset in the world, its economic muscle in the city of London as the great trading city for all kinds of economic instruments. It's now been almost halved in its impact. You've got to be careful. Nationalism sounds good. It sounds wonderful when you're pounding the podium and shouting about it. It's hell when you translate it into the global world we live in.
Oh, those are interesting thoughts from all of you. I'm looking at the clock here, but I'd be remiss to tell you all that I'm not so sure about everything you're all talking about. I mean, look at Germany. I have ancestry from Germany, and German manufacturing craftsmanship has always been top-notch, world class on everything. And the German economy is collapsing. Take a brand like Porsche. The operating profits of Porsche are 99% down. Demand for 911 Porsches have collapsed globally. Nobody cares about a German car anymore in the
That's
manufacturing
because that's
sector.
because of the Lexus LC5.
In the German economy and the manufacturing sector is in disarray, and the premium German standard of world class everything is at risk. What is
Well,
going
I'm
on?
glad you raised Porsche. Let me mention Porsche. This is a classic example of doing yesterday's machine perfectly. It is a wonderful machine, but it's not an electric machine. It's not the machine people want now. It's the machine that people
They they
wanted.
they have an electric Porsche that performs better than a Tesla.
But in that particular
So does
high
China.
performance,
It's called the Taycan. It's called the
yeah, I
Taycan.
know
They've
about
had it
it,
for three
but
years.
it's failed to capture the world market, whereas other cars have. This is, you can build a better watch. They build the best watches in Switzerland, but they build a lot more watches in China, and they're very good. Uh,
Well, so
used to be some of the best carpets outside of Turkey were made in England by two technologies of carpet weaving that came along in the Industrial Revolution. Uh, they're not players in the carpet market anymore. The fact is that if you don't adjust to the trends of the time, you get left behind. Porsche did
yeah,
not adjust to the trends of the time, is not
but
made the car wanted today, is making the car wanted yesterday, and that's tough. And that may also be true of me, but I'm not going to dwell on. Yes, sir.
Llewellyn, that's not the point. The point is, if you were running Germany, what would you do to save the country? Will
Well,
you
I don't
will
think the
you
country
close
need.
will you close borders and be a nationalist, or will you let
No.
China take the whole thing and destroy your economy?
No, I don't think that's the choice. To begin with, that's not the choice. And if you chose one of those, you'd have made the wrong choice. You need to accommodate the productivity. You need to bring more AI into that German manufacturing to accommodate. I was overlooking at the manufacture of the German aircraft manufacturer, which is part of a European-wide company. It also makes the Airbus in France. And they were beginning to see the cost of labor be a problem, but luckily for them, they sell their airplanes to the government, not the Airbus, but their military airplanes, which they make in Germany, and their helicopter, which they make in Germany. These are competitions. They have a very strong trade union system in Germany, which has worked fairly well because there's been a much better relationship between the trade unions and the management, and a trade union has a seat on the board of most companies. However, it's still keeping their price structure too high. The pursuit of the old quality has held them back. The old ways of achieving, not the old quality, but the old ways of achieving the old quality. And they're just going to have to go through a bit of an evolution and catch up. But they've got the talent, and if you have the talent, you will triumph. Look at Japan. In the 1990s and 1980s, people were running around saying, "MITI is the answer." Remember, the trader says, that they do it right. Everything's done right in Japan. And some idiot in Japan said that in the 21st century, America would be their factory and Europe would be their boutique. No mention of China and India, 2.5 billion, nearly 3 billion people. It was a very skewed view of the future. They were a great lesson on how you can do it and how it went wrong. And it went wrong in a way because they were practicing their version of Smoot-Hawley. But what went right is a country that had no fundamental natural resources realized that the product that the world wanted was value added. And they went at it with enormous skill. I saw them absolutely eviscerate the British motorcycle industry because the Brits looked back and wanted to build a motorcycle that people thought they liked because it had a Kickstarter and of course it wasn't. People were sick of hurting their ankles. If you've ever had a Kickstarter motorcycle, you'd know. They put an electric start, and the way they took out the British. There were 8 marks a motorcycle made in Britain. They took them out, all of them. The government supported one. I think there's a revival of Norton now. There are changes, there's evolution. Putting up barriers is not the way you deal with evolution. Taking down barriers and agglomerating, getting to be a larger, more flexible institutions. The problem with the European Union, and I've been much involved with it for a very long time, going back to the 1960s. I worked for Lord Beaverbrook, the Canadian-British publisher, actually opposing Britain's. If Raynard says he doesn't agree with his own thesis, I don't agree with what I did in the 1960s. In 1960s, I was paid by Lord Beaverbrook to oppose Britain's entry into the common market. I was quite wrong, and I certainly opposed Brexit, which was a few loudmouths talking empty nonsense, clanging symbol of rubbish about sovereignty, and it's cost dearly, and it continues to cost. And Britain is one awful mess now with an almost insupportable national debt. And by the way, we're heading towards an insupportable national debt because of unneeded, unnecessary tax cuts at the wrong time.
All right. Let me cut you off because
let
we're
me just
over
say
time.
something.
We're over time. John, 30
Yeah, let me do
seconds.
something to my
30
distinguished
seconds.
colleague. The
30
problem with
seconds.
Japan was that they had no entrepreneurs, so they were due not to do well. And I think what America has going for it is freedom. I don't think that China has freedom. I think America has freedom.
Does America have freedom when men in masks are grabbing people on the
Yeah,
street
well,
and deporting them without trial? Is
what
that
I think,
freedom?
well, when I say freedom in the economic sense, what I mean is that the people in China, they don't own their companies. And when they make money, they move to America. And the
Well, that's
policy,
a very
I haven't
large
looked too much at the
generalization.
policy of the president and grabbing people, but it certainly doesn't look good. But certainly, if I don't know what what is the reason of it behind it is. But I just want to say on the economic side, as the Chinese companies do their economic stuff and create wealth. They bring their wealth to America because of the idea of
All right. Let me give Raynard the final word. Final word, Raynard.
My prediction is over the next 2 to 3 years, every country, major industrial power is going to be looking inward. They'll still have global trade, but if it's bad for my country, I don't care what NATO, the EU, I don't care I'm doing what's best for my country. And if you look at what's going on around Europe, especially, Europe is electing all these younger conservative leaders throughout Europe because they're tired of the status quo.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Johnny, take us away. We're way over time.
Well, my friends, here is their appointed duty. They keep trying to tell me all you want to do is use me. Well, I want to spread the news that if it feels this good getting used, oh, you just keep on using me until you use me up. Well, until you use me up.
Thank you, Johnny.
Okay.
Raynard,
Raynard,
look,
you did
My
good,
friend.
son. I'm proud of you. And you look good. I like your health is good.
Yeah.
wishing
You
you all
look
the
as
best in
good as you look.
2026.
Obviously,
Thank
you're
you so
working out.
much.
You got some shoulders now. You ain't a little puny ass some bitch. Okay.
Take care, Andre. See you
I'll
guys
call you.
later.
Okay. All
Take
right. Thank you,
care. Take
Raynard.
care.
All
Bye-bye.
right.